So like I said, these rules are definitely the most complicated rules that we're going to learn. So it's imperative that we stay focused on this for the time that we have together. The worksheet is not bad at all. It's only 8 questions because I know that this is going to get tricky and it's going to get a little confusing. We're going to make a lot of mistakes throughout the process, but that's part of the process. So just take your time and try and see what I'm doing here. So we're going to call this rule number 1, rule number 2, rule number 3, just to make it easy. Rule number 1 is for a 90-degree clockwise rotation to the right. If we're starting out with a pre-image point of XY, we rotate that point 90 degrees clockwise, and my coordinates become y, comma, negative x. Y, comma, negative x. Thank you. It looks easy enough, but we want to do this in a specific order. So we have to change the sign of our y. I'm sorry. See, I'm already messing up because it's confusing. Forget I said that. We got to change the sign of our x and then swap places with our x and our y. So the first thing you want to do is flip the sign of your x. So if my x coordinate is 3, it would become negative 3. If my x coordinate's negative 2, it would become positive 2. That's what we want to do first. Then we want to swap the order of your x and your y. We really, really want to stick with those 2 steps in order. Because if you swap the order of your x and y first, chances are you're going to flip the sign of the wrong number. And you're going to get something that is incorrect. Here's what that would look like. If we start with point A at 2, 3, the first thing we want to do is flip the sign of our x. So what is my x coordinate for point A? 2. What would happen if we flipped the sign of that 2? What would we get? Negative 2. This is what I'm saying. What you did was step 2. Swap the order. That is the second thing we do. The first thing, I cannot stress this enough, is just flip the sign of your x. X is 2. We flip the sign of 2 and get negative 2, comma 3. Now we do step 2, which is to swap the order of your x and y, giving me the point A prime with the coordinates of 3, comma, negative 2. And that's our correct image point, A prime. Probably see how this is going to be confusing. As long as you follow these two very simple steps in order, you should be okay. Take the x coordinate and flip the sign. 2 becomes negative 2. Then swap the order of your x and y. Negative 2, which is in front, goes to the back, and positive 3, which was in the back, goes to the front. All right, if we had a point like point B at negative 1, comma, negative 4, the first thing we need to do is flip the sign of my x. So for point B prime, what would my x coordinate become? Just positive 1. Negative 1, comma, negative 4 becomes positive 1, comma, negative 4. We flip the sign. And then we swap the order of x and y. So positive 1, negative 4 would become what? Negative 4, positive 1. So that example is just to show that even though in the rule we have negative x, that minus sign means we're flipping the sign. So if my x is already negative, it becomes positive. If my x is positive, like for point A, it's going to become negative. Once we establish that sign change, then we swap the order of my x and my y. Quick show of thumbs. Is that making some sense? Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs sideways, maybe. Thumbs down, no. Okay, I appreciate that. Mostly up, a few sideways. That's all right. So that's rule number 1. Now this is where things are going to get a little bit more complicated now with rule number 2. Which of course we use with a 90-degree counterclockwise rotation. When we are rotating a point or a figure 90 degrees counterclockwise, our coordinate x comma y becomes negative y comma x. Negative y comma x. What's different about this rule in comparison to rule number 1? Anything different? Or are they the same? The y is negative instead of the x. But again, this is why it's confusing. They look very similar. But now, all we're changing is step 1. Instead of flipping the sign of my x, we're going to flip the sign of my y and then swap the order. So let's write those steps out just so we know. Step number 1, flip the sign of your y, and then swap the order of your x and y. flip the sign of your y, making a negative y coordinate positive or making a positive y coordinate negative. And just like before, we bring our x coordinate to the back, y coordinate, which is now flipped, up to the front. This is why I made the worksheet short, so you could take your time with each problem. Don't just try and breeze through it. Chances are you're going to flip the wrong thing, swap the wrong thing. Keeping it short so we can really understand how this is going to look. For example, if we have point C at 6, 5, and we're rotating point C 90 degrees counterclockwise, the first step in doing so is flip the sign of your y. What number is my y, 6 or 5? 5, x comes before y, right? We're at this point, not this point. We're at this point. Y is 5. So that 5 is going to become what? Negative 5. Then we swap the position or the order of my x and my y in step 2, giving me the point C prime with the coordinates of what? Negative 5, 6. Again, take it step by step. Last year, I didn't teach this lesson in this much detail. I didn't include these steps, and it took us like 3 days to actually get through this and be confident with it, because mainly because it was my fault. Because like last year, this is all I showed is this, which even me just looking at it right now, I'm confused. So this, step by step, break it down piece by piece. You're going to get your answer right every time. All right? Take your time. I know some of you guys like to be done in 30 seconds. Take your time with this. It is confusing. Let's take a look at another example of rule number 2 with point D. If point D is at, I don't know, we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How about, good, negative 8 and negative 7. All right, accidentally did that in order, but that's okay. Negative, what's that? We will swap them, but again, that's step 2. I don't even want to think about step 2 until I've done step 1. What are we going to do here in step 1? We're going to make 7 positive. Exactly. My y coordinate, the second number, is negative 7. I want to flip the sign of your y, making negative 7 positive 7. Now, like Darius said, what are we going to do with these two numbers? We're going to swap them. All right? We're going to swap them. I want to avoid saying we're going to flip them, because what we flip is the sign. When we change positions of these numbers, it's more of a swap than a flip. But that's just kind of, verbiage there. Giving me the point D prime with the coordinates of what? 7, negative 8. Exactly. That's a great, yeah, sure. Let's do that. You guys are going to do this one by yourself. Give it a try. Let's say we got point E at Let's switch it up. Let's do one negative, one positive. How about -3, comma, +2? Give that a try. Use the rule. Use the steps. See if you can come up with what E prime would be. Great job. Very close. All you did here was step 1, with the sign of your y. In -3, 2, what's your y? 2. That's okay, so hold on. You did swap. But swapping them is step 2. What you did not do is step 1. Flip the sign. 2 is positive. Flip the sign of a positive. What does it become? Negative. So right here, negative sign of -2. And now we have -2. Then we swap them. -2. So you're really good at step 2. I can tell that. You gotta remember this is step 1. Flip the sign. Then we swap them. Okay? Yeah, great job. That's great. What you guys did. So here's what we forgot to do. You swapped them good, right? The 2 is going to come to the front. But step 1 says flip the sign of your y. What is the y? 2. So in step 1, 2 becomes -2. Then we swap them around, and I've got -2, comma, -3. All right, looks like a lot of great work here. Let's take a look. Step 1, again, we got to do step 1 before we can get to step 2, right? Step 1, we're going to take our y coordinate. What's my y coordinate here? 2. And we're going to make that 2 negative. We flip the sign of a +2. We get a -2. Step 2 says now we're going to swap the order. So what would my E prime coordinates be? -2, comma, -3. Great job. Luckily for us, rule 3 is the easiest. I saved the easiest for last. So let's come back together real quick so we can talk about rule 3. I got to flip over, but if you can continue on that page, please continue on that page. You probably are going to need a second notebook before we get out of here in May, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Is anyone nearing the end of their notebook already? Yeah. Couple people? That's good. That means you're taking all your notes, because I'm almost at the end of mine too. That's good. Maybe that'll last a couple more weeks. Let's go to rule 3. Last but definitely not least. Last but easiest. What type of rotation is rule 3 going to cover? We did 90 clockwise in rule 1, 90 counterclockwise in rule 2, 180-degree rotation. Now, because with 180 degrees we go either direction, we only have one rule. Right? My rule for 90 clockwise is different than my rule for 90 counterclockwise. But with 180, we only need one rule. If we're starting with the point x comma y like we always do, we're going to turn that into -x comma -y. So take a look at that rule. What are we not doing here that we've done in the previous two rules? Yeah, Devin, what are we not doing?
So the other one's either x is negative or y is negative, but in this one both of them are negative.
Beautiful, great observation. Before, either x was negative or y was negative. Here they're both. Hope, what else are we not doing? We're not switching the x and y. We're not switching the x and y. I heard Ayana say it too. We're not swapping, right? So x is going to stay in the front, y is going to stay in the back, but we're going to flip the sign of both coordinates. So just to keep it consistent, step one. Let's come back together, guys. Flip the sign of your x first. Then flip the sign of your y. In reality, it doesn't matter which one you do first, and we can do these both in the same step, but I want to break it down just to keep it simple. For example, let's say we got the point F, we're on F now, at 5, 1. Step 1 says we're going to flip the sign of my x. So what is going to happen to that 5? It's going to turn negative. Step 2 says flip the sign of my y. What's going to happen with that 1? It's going to turn negative as well. Boom. I told you that one's easier.
Oh, whoa. What was it?
That's it. We don't have to swap. We just make both terms negative because they're both positive. All right? Now, what would happen? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. In point G, sorry, I don't know my alphabet. What if we had negative 2, comma, negative 4? Wouldn't it stay like that is a great question. Remember, when we have negative x, negative y, that doesn't mean we turn our numbers negative. It means we flip the sign of what we already have. So don't get tricked by having two positives and they both turn negative. That's just because the opposite of positive is negative. But what's the opposite of two negatives? Two positives. 2, 4 is where my G prime is going to be at. Very quickly, let's take a look at our warm-up from today. We did a 180-degree rotation. Negative 8, negative 6 became 8, 6. Right? Negative 5, negative 2 became 5, 2. So all we did was flip both signs for my x and my y when we're rotating 180 degrees. Last example I want you guys to do on your own. Actually, I'm going to do two more very quick examples. Give this one a try on your own. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Point H. Let's say we're at negative 6, 3. Take a moment, figure out where my H prime coordinate is going to be. That's fine. Whatever works for you. As long as you're able to find your information, I don't care where you put it. Negative 6, comma 3. Where's my h prime going to be? Perfect. So the pre-image is negative 6, comma 3. That's all right. You did it right, though. What you did was great. What'd you give her? For point H? Oh. Oh, okay, gotcha. You got it. So let's take a look, just so we can get done with this and you have time to work. H prime. My x is negative 6. If I flip the sign, what do I get? 6. Darius, my y is 3. If I flip the sign, what's my y coordinate? Negative 3. Last one. Point I. Let's say I'm at 0, comma 0. I don't know. Give it a try. 30 seconds.
30 seconds?
That's very long if we're thinking really about this problem. Good. 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 What is that?
Yeah, what is that?
There you go. That looks better. Good. Is there such a thing as a negative? No. All right. So what would it be? All right. If I've got 0 and I flip the sign, what do I get? 0. If I got a 0 and I flip the sign, what do I get? 0. Shouldn't it be negative 0 though? There's no such thing as negative 0. This is what people get tripped up with, right? When we see 0, we see a whole number, right? Which usually, like with 3, can you guys figure out your pencil situation later? Usually when we see a whole number, it's implied that it's positive. But is 0 a positive number? No. Well, that must mean 0 is a negative number, right? No, it's neither. 0 is not positive. 0 is not negative. 0 is just 0. I know that's a little confusing, but every rule has its exception.